Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Let's Talk. My name is Mário, and today we'll be talking about the near-death experience with two very special guests who went through this experience and are here now to share their stories. Feel free to ask questions anytime you want. Just leave your comment in the comment section on YouTube or on your right-hand side. But before we get started, it's important to say that you don't have to believe in anything that we discuss here, right? Experience is the best way to gain practical knowledge. So go for it, right? Join us today. We have, as I said, two very special guests. The first one, Amaury Pontieri. He's an educational entrepreneur and one of the founders of Bertone School Network. He currently volunteers as a teacher and researcher at the International Association of Conscientiological Communication, Communicons. Welcome to this edition of Let's Talk, Amaury. It's very good to have you back.
Thank you, Mario. Hi, and hi to everyone who is watching us.
Very good. And having his debut appearance in the Let's Talk today, Djalma Fonseca. Thank you for accepting our invitation, Djalma, to talk about the subject. We know you are an expert. Djalma is the IT architect and business entrepreneur, Conscientiology volunteer, teacher, and painter practitioner since 1989, currently volunteering at Conscious and Unicim. Welcome, Djalma.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation, Mário.
Very good, Djalma. Nice one. Our debate is based on conscientiology. Conscientiology is a neuroscience, right? Conscientiology is a neuroscience that studies the consciousness as a whole. Consciousness is you, each human being on Earth. And the studies of conscientiology is based on the conceptual paradigm.
I'm sorry, Mario. I think you are having problems with your microphone.
With my microphone?
Oh,
yeah,
no,
it came back
okay.
now.
Now it's okay.
Yeah, it's good now?
Yes.
It's good now.
All right, so let me repeat this. Our conversation is based on conscientiology. Conscientiology is a neuroscience, right? Based on consensual paradigm, which is focused on 7 pillars: bioenergies, holosoma, multidimensionality, as we manifest ourselves in different kinds of dimensions, existential dimensions, pluri-existentiality, self-research, when we study ourselves, when we put ourselves in the center of our observations, right? The cosmoethics, the ethics that goes beyond the human ethics, universalism as well. Conscientiology has more than 20 conscientiocentric institutions, and ASSIPI is one of them. ASSIPI stands for International Association for Intersubstantial Parapsychism, and is specialized in the study, research, development, and the practical use of the parapsychism, an indispensable attribute for consciential evolution. Our project is ASSIPI in English project, which is engaged in the internationalization of conscientiology worldwide. And we have a co-host today, Rodrigo Marchiolli, right, Rodrigo? Rodrigo is sharing the hosting today. I think Rodrigo has high expectations about this conversation today. Don't you,
Yeah,
Rodrigo?
yeah, definitely. Thank you, Mario, for being here. And I'd like also to thank our guests for being here also and making this talk possible. And obviously, our crew members that behind the scenes making this talk also possible. So, Mario, thank you again very much. And our guests. And I'd like to start this conversation hearing our guests, Djalma and Amaury, about their experiences. Today, we're talking about near death experience, and I think it's a good way to start to hear them. Well, what brought them here to talk about this topic? So, Amaury, if you want to start, please talk to us a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Well, briefly, my experience, my near-death experience, occurred in during the pandemics. I was a researcher of this theme of near-death experiences. I've been researching this for at least 40 years. But the interesting thing, because I'm a journalist, information I was studied journalism, and including I've written many articles through these years, uh, uh, interview many people who passed through the experience, including Djalma. We have made a documentary with his participation. But the interesting thing about this, about my experience, that happens to me as a researcher. I was many years researching this, and finally I passed through the
Yeah.
experience. It was during the pandemics, before we have the vaccines, and I caught COVID-19, and I was hospitalized, and my condition becomes worse, and I was intubated. That means that I got mechanical breathing, and I was giving up hope by the doctors. I nearly It was a very critical condition. My family was warned that I may not survive, and that in that week that I was in a induced coma, many things happened inside my conscience, my consciential condition, or in my internal life. There was things that was going on outside in the hospital, but many things happening with me in that condition. And as a researcher, I know that it was a out of body experience,
Hmm.
and that has many things that I was capable to see and to feel, and that was a very intense condition. That when I regained awareness, I was capable of understand and and and
Am-
see and have
Amaury,
consequences in my life.
I would like to ask a question, taking advantage of what you already said to us, uh, because you studied a lot about this
Yes,
and you had the experience.
yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah, I was thinking while you were talking, during this experience, which you consider a near-death experience, which we also consider as an out-of-body experience, did you were conscious about your researches? You were lucid enough to say, "Oh, I studied that, and I'm living the things that I studied."
That's a
You were
very,
conscious that.
very that's a very interesting question, and the answer is yes. In some sort of awareness, because I was in a complicated situation that I was submitted to medication, to stress in a intensive care unit, There are people dying around me, and there was a very intense movimentation of health professionals, and that was a very complicated scenario. But some things that I was seeing and was feeling, I remember and say, oh, that is, for instance, the panoramic vision that people usually see when it's dying. So that I was certain that I am dying at that moment. That generates a very intense emotional condition that made me very disturbed, and I have to make a very strong will. I have to have the will to control that emotional situation.
And how much time you remember that they experience that?
It's very difficult for me to say how much, because I don't even know at when that happens. If it was in the beginning of the coma, in the middle of that week, or at the end. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer. But many things happened during this period.
Okay.
Yes, you said that you were in a medical state, very delicate. You were like frail, physically
Yes.
frail. Lots of people describe death as something that you have to fear. So, with this, just about, because death for you was just about to happen. You were really in a situation that anything could happen. Do you have fear of dying?
Absolutely. Yes, I not just fear. I was certain that I was dying because I was seeing people dying around me. I'm not seeing with my physical eyes, but I was in a condition that I kind of see everything that was happening in that environment. So I was certain that I was, and mainly because I was in a minute or in a day, the day before, I was in a hospital room, and nobody told me that I was getting worse, and they sedated me, and when I start to understand what was happening, I was in the intensive care unit. So it was like you were wakened in a situation to see that you are dying. But and then I was start to feel in panic. That was a very difficult moment for me. And then I start to see lots of scenes and in other places and other times. It was a very interesting kind of a panoramic vision or panoramic view, not just personal but generical scenes that starts to make me more quiet and pacific. So that helps a lot. It was a kind of paradidactic or didactic situation for me to calm down and to start to getting better.
This is what I was looking for to ask you, Amaury, because I was thinking if that situation and that awareness that you were living through this experience, if that was important or pivotal, relevant for you to survive. If you hadn't experienced that near-death experience, that experience you are describing to us, if you could survive without that, did you consider that experience was really important for your survival?
It's a very interesting question that I'm not sure that if I can answer to you, but certainly it was very important to my this kind of conscience that I have now. My life After that, it was very different, and that is one thing that people who pass through the experience always tell, that the life is one after the experience and another kind of life after that experience, and that happens with me. So one thing that I was I write about it. I know, and I heard the people saying it happens to me. That was very rich for me, not only for my studies, but for my life as well.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. We have a question coming from people watching us live, which is from NEK. Question: did you notice anything different in terms of the time? I think that Rodrigo had already asked you about the time, why it was
Yeah.
occurring, and did you see a channel or a light? But this is a very common description of people who have gone through
Yes,
in the experiences, right? To see a light, tunnel, and so forth. Have you had this?
yes. It's important to say that this complete experience that includes the tunnel, the light, and the encounter with some beings, invisible or guides, spiritual guides. There is a syndrome that is very known, and I don't have the complete experience. The kind of experience that I have, that it was very intense for me, it was the panoramic vision and the out of body experience. That these two things that are very common in near that experience happened to me, but the other things I didn't notice anything like that. Like the tunnel, like the light at the end of the tunnel, the situation when you have to choose to stay in the astrophysical dimension or to come back. I don't leave anything like that. I don't leave anything like, the panoramic vision, it was very intense, and there are we don't have the time for me to speak everything that I see here, but we don't. It was impossible to say everything in the time that we have here, but it was very intense and made me complete to understand that we are biological beings, consciousness passing through the biological condition. As biological beings, we passed this process of birth and death and rebirth and death many, 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 many times, uncountable times, and there are nothing new about it. But the experience, the real experience, is the consciousness that is passing through this. That was the kind of final lesson of all this experience, and that it was very important to make me more pacific, serene, and calm during that critical condition. It was absolutely important for me at that time.
Okay. Mário, I think we could also hear a little bit from Djalma, because Djalma, I think, obviously had, as you said, the experience, a near-death experience, but I think it was a little bit different for you, Djalma, wasn't it?
Yes, it was different for me. For me, I can relate to many things that he said, especially the afterwards, and the impact of the panoramic view was very strong for me as well. But the situation, the context that I had my experience was quite different. I had it 40 years ago. I was very young. I was like 21 years old only. At the time, I was training as a fighter pilot for the Brazilian Air Force, and I had a motorcycle accident, not a plane accident or anything, but the motorcycle accident. I had an open fracture, and this open fracture, through this open fracture, I had an infection. So 3 days later, after the accident, I was in entering a coma state. And as I was going into this coma state, because of that infection, a very strong infection with a bacteria called Clostridium, and it's very common in war times, and not very common out of that. It's very interesting, this detail, but this bacteria is very aggressive, especially the toxins that it leaves as it eats up your tissue, right? It's called gas gangrene, becomes big bubbles of gas, and they had to amputate my leg to try to debris most of the infected tissue and try to see if I would survive out of that, because the situation was a generalized infection. So it was a septicemic. It was in my blood already. It's very uncommon to come out of this situation. As I was going into this coma, then I had this experience. When I was going into the coma, I had the panoramic view. My panoramic view was not images. It was interesting because I was living the feeling that I was living this world, right? Or living this life. But and all my senses, my physical senses, I was losing all my physical sense, or I was not seeing, I was not listening, anything, but I was going into my consciousness, or into my inner self, I could say this way. And I had this overview very fast of my life, of all the thoughts, all the feelings that I had throughout my life with a lot of people, and all the encounters, whatever I was doing in details, but mostly thoughts, feelings, and this a big balance of all of it. And the balance was not very good. The impact was like, wow, I could have taken more advantage of things. So this was the first huge impact. It was not bad. It was not like, oh my God, but something that actually triggered a deep reflection about it. At that moment, when I was seriously thinking about how I spent my life and my opportunity to be here and do assistance and things like this, I felt two other consciousness together with me on that same state. I wasn't seeing anything. I wasn't listening to anything, but thought was action at that situation. My thoughts were, I knew that my thoughts were perceived by them as their thoughts were perceived by me, but in block. Was everything like instantaneous. So I felt like they were very welcoming, very warmly welcoming me, and saying, "No, very nice, very good, everything that you've done." And I was feeling quite differently from that. I'm not feeling that it was very good. No, it was very good. And then the question came out: you really wanna die, or you wanna continue living? And at that moment, the only thing that was important to me is that, will I remember everything? I remember this reflection that I had. Remember this. If I remember that, I want to go back. If I don't, if I'm not going to remember, it's up to you. You tell me what's better. And then they said, no, you're going to remember. Then, okay, I want to come back. I want to go back again. Okay. At that moment, I wasn't saying, well, I will come back with one leg, two legs. I lost my leg there, but there was actually a minor detail when you look at the opportunity that you have in a critical life like that, for me.
Okay. Let me, Mario, can I ask a question for both of them?
Sure.
I am thinking here. Amaury said that his experience was very stressful and traumatic. And Djalma, your experience during that time, you were near death, you were almost dying. Was it traumatic? Was it stressful? How was it?
In the beginning, when I was breathing oxygen, it was kind of traumatic. I
Mm-hmm.
was feeling that I was gonna die. Was a feeling that that closeness of death. I felt some pressure. But
Mm-hmm.
as the process of dying started,
Mm-hmm.
then it was very was a lot of pleasure. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it was like a big
Yeah.
relief, a big relief. I was feeling a big relief, even though in my senses were becoming too keen. You know, an
Mm-hmm.
expansion of all my perceptions, and that situation is also very pleasurable. It's like when you're expanding yourself and you're feeling back. It's like you're going back home. You know, uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, it's it's
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. But
it's a pleasure. It's a lot of pleasure.
yeah, we
It's
have a
funny to
limit.
say that, but it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the point I'm trying to get to a point here, and I think Amaury has a limited time here with us today. He'll have to leave us before the end of our talk. But the point that I'm trying to get here is that uh, someone could say, well, this could be a hallucination, this could be a dream, and your imagination, because you are submitted with such a traumatic, such a pressure
Yes,
into that experience. So your brain was not functioning well, so you had some kind of dream or hallucination.
perfect.
But uh, in your experience, Djalma, you were very calm, you were very serene. And Amaury
Yes,
also had that feeling that he was dying, but at some point he could uh, bring together this calmness and this sereneness and could distinguish what was happening and that okay, I am a consciousness. I'm not this body. I am something else. And
Yes.
the point I'm trying to get is how do we say that that was not a hallucination, a dream, something that your brain produces when we are really,
one of
yeah, under a very stressful situation.
in my I would say that Amaury probably didn't get as far as I did dying. If he
Yes.
went dying, he would have pleasure too. Or maybe if he did, he didn't remember. But that's my point of view. When he tells about his experience, it feels like the same thing that I was feeling up to a point.
He was not
But
deaf enough.
if he went more
It
than
was
that point, he would feel things that close to what I'm telling you.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, but in my case, it was the interesting that is I was at certain time I was in panic. I was certain that I was dying because even I see people dying, and
yes,
I understand that there was people dying around me, and I was there to die. That was a completely certain. Uh, and at some point, my hypothesis that it was induced. I start to see like a movie of
mhm,
many scenes of people dying, of battle situations, of many things throughout the history. For instance, a mummified body and people working in a mummified body. I was able to see in first view this
mhm,
kind of situation, and that thing that I was seeing brought me to the certain that I, as a biological being, not as a consciousness, as a consciousness, I have experienced the death, the biological death, many times in many periods, in many eras, and that was nothing new. And I see, including non-human transition, animals transitions. That I was my hypothesis that I was linked to that in my remote past in a form. I don't know how, but I was seeing that movie, and that gave me the tranquility, the sereneness that make me understand and control that panic that I was, including I remember one comparison that Djalma once told me that was if you want to take an injection, you can be in two kind of a state, a tense state that injection will hurt you and will give you intense pain, or you can relax your arm, for instance, and have the injection, and the experience would be a little better, let's say. And so I understand that at that moment. Say, well, if you have to die, you can die screaming and in panic, like you was in a minute ago, or you can understand that is a experience like you pass through a million times. I don't know how many times. So that understanding and that state of spirit made me calm, and that calmness, that state of more tranquility, kind of me projected me to outside the planet. In a minute later, I was not in that hospital environment. I was in the sidereal space. I was in the outer space, and I at that moment I was thinking at that moment that I was dying, but I was happy with that. I was so if dying is something that I control, the state of dying is something that I control. That kind of feeling give me tranquility. And guess what? I was not dying. I was just having
That's a very
out of body experience.
That's a very common account from people who have gone through NDE. There must be something very good in having this experience, because no one wants to come back to this soma, right? Everyone wants to stay there. Say, why are we going to? No, I don't want to come back. I don't want to come back. People, we have some other questions from the people watching us, right? One more, NK asked, I think this question can go to Amaury or Djalma, of course. Did you ask for helpers to help you to come back to life? She's a bit worried about your panic and say, did you ask the helpers to come back or something like this?
In my case, it is a very brief answer. I didn't think about it at that time. Later, I stay in the hospital 8 more days, and in a very difficult situation, and then I evoke some helpers in some occasion. But at that time, I was not asking for the helpers to help me anyway, but I absolutely certain that they helped me. It's very clear, because my panoramic view is absolutely, educational. Is absolutely helped me in a way that it was absolutely necessary at that point, and that is a work of helpers. I am absolutely certain about that.
Very good. Paradidactically speaking, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't ask for helpers actually either, but at that moment, I was saying, as I was going through the experience, the nice state that I was going through, I didn't want to come back. I didn't want to come back from the experience. It's not like It's not like trying to survive. It's something that seems so natural, and uh, uh, it's like a catharsis. It's like a relief, a big relief. It's like when you go to sleep, you're very tired,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the opportunity to sleep. That's my feeling. So
Djalma,
who's gonna try not to do that? You know?
you think it's kind of a paradox? It's
Yeah,
kind of a paradox because when you are not attached to life, you actually comes back to life
yeah.
in this
Yeah.
physical dimension. Let's say like this.
It's true. It's when you don't fight death. People think that they have to fight death. When you don't fight death, you just act naturally. Then maybe you come back. You come back if you have to come back also. So from that point on, I'm not scared of dying anymore. I think I wasn't scared of dying itself. We are more scared of the process of how you're
Mhm.
gonna die. But the afterlife, even though it might be something that sometimes it's a question to a lot of people, for me wasn't. It wasn't. Since I was a child, I knew that I'm more than this body because I saw spirits. I had out of body experiences. I knew that I was more than this body, so I knew that I would survive that. I was
Mhm.
certain of that. But the process is itself, we are scared of it. We are scared of suffering, the suffering
Mhm.
involved in the process of dying. But once you pass that, it's very nice. It's very warm. It's very warm and very nice, and it was very good to feel that you're not alone. That was the best feeling. Uh, on that point. But the return also was very strong. The return for me had a lot of information that it's not possible to have a hallucinating. I had a lot of information, and in the return, for instance, I knew the extension that my mother was in the hospital. I wasn't even supposed to know that my mother was there, but I knew that
Mhm.
she was in the hospital. I knew what room and what the extension number of that room was. I knew
Mhm.
that.
The- the-
So
the- Yeah.
that's not hallucination. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's exactly the point that I was trying to make here. What were the criteria, or what were the criteria we you could use to say that it was not hallucination? So this is one of them, but I think you have many
No, I
more.
have many more. I have
Yes, one
many
thing
more.
that's important to know about this, and I am very familiarized with this argument of the hallucination. In my case, I have the hallucinations also because the
Hmm.
medication, because
Yeah.
there are many things that I saw that after the experience, I narrated for the people, and they say, well, this is not happen at all.
Hmm.
And other things that I think that was hallucination uh, did happen. So you don't have a very good, at least in my case, the
Hmm.
hospital situation. I was not certain about that what was a fact and what that is not a fact. It's a
Hmm.
very difficult moment to discern that. But
Hmm.
as a researcher, as a person and a teacher, an instructor of out of body experiences, and I experienced out of body experience before my NDE. So I
Hmm.
was able to see, well, now I'm in my body, and now I'm not in my body. That experience I already have. So
Hmm.
in one moment you have pain, you have a physical pain, you are not breathing. It's difficult to breathe. And in the other moment, you don't breathe at all, and you don't have pain at all, and you feel like a Djalma narrated. You feel completely in a freedom situation to fly, to think, including in a way that you don't think when you are in your physical body with the limitation of your brain. So if you have these terms of comparison, it's very easy for you to say, now I'm in my body, now I'm not in my body. But you have to have the experience. You have to know, you have to study, to read, to know about that, to admit that the out of body experience, it's a reality. It's not a hallucination episode or something like that. And if you are just a theoricist, if you know the things not with your experience, but just with your intellect, you don't have this opportunity. You have to pass, like Mario said in the beginning of this live. You have to experience. You have to have your own experience, because if you don't, it's just you can have thousands of theories to explain that. But if you have one experience, that it will be convincing for you.
Yes. Very interesting. I would like to ask a question concerning the ego. Have you guys noticed that your ego had changed? If so,
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, it was important for me. I will have to be rebaptized. I will have to have another name, because my personality, my ego is completely different now. That
that's interesting. That's interesting.
before 4 years ago, when I had that experience.
Yeah,
And
definitely. I would agree.
In a sense, Djalma had a very deeper experience than mine, so he could.
No, it's 40 years now, and I still take advantage of the situation. You know, it's something that sometimes is so strong that you still digest things from that experience years later. You know, I'm still digesting it. It's very, very interesting in that sense.
Yeah, but we have two situations here concerning ego. The ego that you had after the experience that it changed you, of course, depending on how much it was.
Yes.
But my question was if you felt the change of your ego outside of the body.
Oh, definitely too. The thing is, my psyche was completely different than my psyche here, in a sense of I knew things and I knew those people, even though I don't know them. Now I know who they are. But it took me a long time to actually know who was there. But at that point, I knew things that I usually wouldn't know now. And this knowledge is structural. It's not something from my brain. So I could tell you that that experience separates clearly for me the memory of the brain and the memory of the consciousness. And from that point on, I'm more of an extra-physical consciousness than an intraphysical consciousness. So when you're born in your body, your brain, it changes you, right? To an intraphysical being, and those experiences sort of integrate you, reintegrate you, extraphysical being with intraphysical being. It's instead of being paradoxical, instead of being separated, this relationship is more synergetic, and this changes you for the whole life. It's
Guys,
very interesting.
I would have to ask you apologize, but I will have to go. And I, as a former interviewer of Djalma, I would advise you to explore with him the after NDE in his life, because it's very, very interesting. And I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak about my experience. I think it was one of the more critical and more important experiences that I have in my entire life. And I think that I can speak for Djalma also.
Very true.
But so goodbye, and
Thank you, Amaury, for coming.
thank you very
Thank
much
you,
for
Amaury, for your
the
presence.
invitation, and so long.
Very good. We have one more question to Djalma now. Right, this is a very curious question because it happens quite often with those who have experienced this. Did you have contact with already left people?
Not in the near-death experience. As a matter of fact, I thought that those two beings that I had the contact were deceased, but they are not. Along my life, I discovered later that those people are not deceased. On that experience, I didn't have contact with other people, just those two. But in other experiences, other than the near death, I had experience with contacting deceased people, but not on this one. I thought they were deceased at the time I had the experience, but later I could understand that those people were also on an out of body experience. I was near death; they weren't.
I see. Very interesting.
Djalma, I would like to come back a little bit about the things I was asking you. And you said you had many criteria to discriminate between
Yes.
the two conditions. And I would like to link this question with the other thing you were talking about, the many things you are still digesting from the experience, because I think that there might be some relation between them. Could you go a little bit deep into that point?
Yes. For instance, I was telling you that I discovered little by little the relationship that I had with those two people that were there. So little by little, I understood that those two people, they are part of an extra physical team that I'm part of much before this life. So we've been working together as consciousness, as extra-physical consciousness, for a long time. But I just could understand that over 20 years after the experience.
Okay, but today, what else you are discovering after 40 years?
Well, what I'm discovering has more to do with my inner self. Okay. For instance, I'm discovering my identity, identity as an extra physical consciousness, and this has to do with things that I perceived there. You know, the way I was seeing things, understanding things, the way I was looking into my father and the people that I had experienced. So, for instance, I'm giving much more importance of the relationship that we have with the people that we encounter in our lives. At that point, up before that experience, I didn't understand how important it was encountering some of the people that were there. So I had retrocognitions with those people. I understood from where and why we are getting together, why things are happening this way. So you start putting more pieces in your puzzle. Every day I put more pieces in my puzzle, understanding the relationship with my father, with my mother, with my grandfather, and a lot of people that I had experienced at that time. I was in the military, and some of the people that were there with me had relationship with my critical life, many years ago, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like 2,000 years ago. So,
Mm-hmm.
so those things are a little strong to think about it. My near death experience had to do directly with my life. It was my critical life 2,000 years ago when I was a general.
Mm-hmm.
It had
And
to do with this.
what criteria do you use to be so certain about that? What kind of method you use to know that?
There are many things, Rodrigo. One of them is the environment, the kind of energy. I used to have a dream when I was a child of a battle that I
Mm-hmm.
recognized that was a battle that took place 200 years before Christ, and the scenery, the smell, the energy of it, and that was a dream. When I was coming close to the accident, that energy came about again. So you recognize things
Mm-hmm.
coming from that. You recognize the presence of those consciousnesses. So the criteria is mostly energetic, but it has
Mm-hmm.
to do with some type of group that has a lot of conscienciometric, let's say, elements to identify them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I had there. I didn't know them at that time, but or I didn't remember that. But now, little by little, I came about remembering everything.
And you were saying that you had this experience, this near-death experience, and to, in some way, to rescue that life you had 2,000 years ago. It's something like that.
Actually, I've been living those 2,000 years rescuing things, and that opportunity
Okay.
came about with a lot of things that
Mm-hmm.
related to that. Sometimes it takes a long time for you to gather everything in
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
critical situation like that.
Mm-hmm. I got
That's
it.
why those people, those extra physical team, were there with me, because this
So,
was part of an assistance that was taking place for hundreds of years.
yeah, so it was not a Djalma's critical moment. It was a
Exactly.
2000, yeah, it was a 2000 hollow biography critical moment, let's say, like
Yes.
this. Okay.
Yes, yeah, that's very interesting, Rodrigo, your question, because it serves as an example to people to have this critical thinking when they have an experience like this, right? To know exactly what the purpose of the experience or what's it for and what's connected with or the learning that we have from it. It's very, very important. And it has to do with my question because I'm really curious about when we talk about the ego, right? What, because we have an ego here and another completely different sometimes. Even you talk about the para identity, it's a different identity when you have an extra physical environment. That's a very good point. I really loved what you said, Djalma. It was very, very clarifying. We have one more question coming from people watching, which is Angelica Guidini. Could you please tell us about the main changes of life did you observe after the experience? I'm not sure, but I think that you have said something around
Well,
this.
no, but no, I understand where Angelica is going with this question. Yes, I can tell you many changes in my life I had. One of them is, of course, I started researching directly. You know, I was already interested on those subjects, but then I started doing it almost professionally. Let's say that was it, it became a main priority in my life, and then I understood better what was my existential program all around this, and that changed completely my strategy of life, you know. So I organized my life completely from that point on. My life now is all dedicated to that. You can imagine. I started Penta 5 years after that. I didn't know that Penta existed. So
Hmm.
and Penta up to now. So it's just that changes completely your life. You know, Penta for me now is 24 hours a day. So just that I don't need to tell you more, but all the organization of my life now is all towards this experience in the sense of the assistance related to this subject, which is it's not only mine. It had to do with a lot of people involved too. So
Hmm.
it's a big responsibility.
Mario, we have time for another question, or we must
Yes,
move
I
on to
just like
final
to.
words?
Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
like to read this comment from NK. I wanted to come back from my near-death experience because NK had also an experience of NDE because of my parents. Then I asked for help and I came back. She said
Understandable.
that.
Okay.
The
So,
Rodrigo, go ahead.
responsibility call, which we do, you had the responsibility, so you need to come back. That's true.
Djalma, I think your experience is very unique. And I'm curious about if you ever heard about someone with experience which would be uh, equal or close to
No,
yours.
I can relate to many situations in several near death experiences, but I know that some details of my experience are very unique. But I researched profoundly my experience. Most people don't go too far. They
Okay.
just continue living their lives in a better way, of course. But
Hmm.
I think I'm more, uh, can I say, stubborn than most people.
Okay. So this is the problem. What did you do to study better your experience?
Well, what did I do? I started um, I took the most important points that I had to do, prioritize them, and started from the priorities and came deeper and deeper on that. So
Hmm.
which were the priorities? First of all, I changed the importance that I was giving to the encounters, to the people, and everything. And I started to study, and I found conscientiology because I wanted to study it better. If at that moment, 19 in the 80s,
Hmm.
I either would go mystic or
Hmm.
scientific would be like this is a hallucination. So none of those paths helped me very much. When I found Waldo, that was scientifically studying something that most people would just look mystically, then I had the tool to drill down into my experience. And that's the way I did it. And that's how it helped me. Conscientiology was the best tool to go through my own experience, produce new experiences that were, let's say, populating my puzzle the way I
Hmm.
needed to.
Perfect. Thank you.
Very good, very good. Unfortunately, our time is over. But before actually going for the wrapping up comments, I have to tell you that an event in English, a very important event in English, is coming up in August. The course Fundamentals of Consciousness Evolution is happening in August 3rd. It starts in August 3rd until September 15th. This is a course carried out by Reaprendência, right? This Consciential Center institution. Reaprendência is a hybrid that is it's a hybrid course happening in person, but also online. And the place is in Roswell, Georgia, United States, well, right? So all classes include energetic practice, discussion, and activities to enhance their theoretical understanding of the science. And and we have like classes about bioenergies, holosoma, assistential, and all that involves the consciential paradigm, right? So fundamentals of consciousness evolution is happening this August, starts on August 3rd and finishing September 15th with 20 classes. It's a 50-hour course. Very, very important. This is entry course for Conscientiology, right, carried out by Real Prudentia, the consciential institution that is giving this course. We have here the registration, right, in our screen, and we also have this in the comments, and we will leave the registration link in the comment. Very important course. That's unfortunately we have to say bye. But before doing this, Djalma, your final words, your wrapping up words about this conversation. What would you like to say to people who might have an experience such like yours?
I would say to take advantage of the situation, because those situations usually are to enhance, to find purpose, their real purpose of life. Life has always a purpose for everyone, and it's important for us to discover this purpose and work towards our objectives of life. So I think none of that happens coincidentally, you know, have great opportunities of evolution.
Very good, Djalma. That's a very good message. Because although you might fear this, it's very important for our evolution. This is a turning point in our lives when we have such an experience. Very good. Thank you very much, Djalma, for your participation in our conversation today. Rodrigo, what is your wrapping up words of this talk?
No, I think I was very benefited by everything Djalma and Amaury said here, and I would like to thank them very much and all the members and the crew from Let's Talk for the opportunity of being here. Thank you again very much.
Very good. Thank you, Luisa Hugerman and Amani Branco, that is in the back office making this talk possible. Right, people? And that's that. I would like to say that I was very happy with the content that we delivered today, that actually our guest delivered, helped by the question. It's very important. I think it's a very ubiquitous experience, right? Nowadays, lots of people have it. It's a lot more common than we can ever imagine. And it's very important, everything that we have, if transcendental or even experiencing the physical reality, that we have a critical thinking, as Djalma just given us a tip on this, right? We must be very painstaking in analyzing the things and going deeper into it, because this is a unique opportunity for us to know more about ourselves. And when we have this chance to know about ourselves outside of the body, the knowledge is amplified to thousands. So it's very, very important. Thank you once more, Djalma, for your participation, Rodrigo, for co-hosting. And people, have a good weekend. Bye-bye.